In the autumn of 1992, a small family moved into an aging red brick house on the edge of York, England. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that seemed to hold its breath at night. The house stood slightly crooked, its roof bowed from decades of rain and frost. It had been built sometime around the 1930s, back when the world was darker, and basements were meant for more than storage. The father said it had character, the mother said it just needed a little warmth. The children, though, they felt something else entirely. The boy was 6. His little sister had barely learned to walk. Their laughter echoed through empty rooms that smelled faintly of damp, brick, and something older, something that had waited. Within a week, the boy had made 2 new friends. He called them Isla and Awan. They were imaginary, of course. That's what his parents believed. But the names were strange, not the kind a child would invent. When asked where he'd heard them, the boy always said softly, "They told me themselves." He'd play with them for hours in the loft and in the cold laundry room below the stairs. His mother sometimes paused halfway up the steps, hearing faint whispers, not her son's voice, not exactly, but something answering back. Then one day, the voices stopped. The boy grew older, the games ended, and the house sank into silence again. But silence can remember. By the time the boy turned 10, sleep became his enemy. At first, it was just strange dreams running through endless corridors, doors that wouldn't open, whispers that stopped when he turned around. Then came the nights when he woke up, frozen, eyes open, body trapped, as though someone heavy pressed against his chest. He could see the room, the ceiling, the faint outline of his toys, and a dark figure standing by his wardrobe, not moving, just watching. He tried to scream for his parents, but nothing came out. When it finally ended, the room was cold enough for his breath to fog in the air. He told his parents. They said it was just nightmares. But he knew better. The house began to play tricks on him. The television flicked on in the dead of night. The old record player hissed and spun, whispering fragments of broken sound, and the lamp in the hallway clicked off and on, never when someone was looking. No one believed him, not even his mother. Then came the shadows. He'd see them move along the walls, faint, stretched shapes that twisted in ways light never could. There was one corner of the living room that felt wrong, colder than anywhere else. Even the family's dog avoided it, staring and whining softly whenever it passed. When he turned 12, the strange activity began to focus around his bedroom. It was the smallest room in the house, facing the long, overgrown garden. Out back stood a cherry tree that bloomed pink in spring, and beyond that, half buried in weeds, an old World War II shelter made of cracked concrete. Every night before bed, he arranged his belongings perfectly, his books stacked, his shoes aligned, his brush on the dresser, but every morning, something was out of place. Never chaos, just wrong. A book turned upside down, the brush on the window ledge, the remote on the floor. Small things, but enough to keep him awake until dawn. Then came the noises, soft rustling from the far corner of his room. He'd get up, flick on the light, but nothing was there. Sometimes he'd feel someone standing behind him, breathing, waiting. As the months passed, the fear grew teeth. The heavy bedroom door, the one that always dragged against the carpet, began closing on its own, slowly, deliberately. One night, the boy watched it pull itself shut, inch by inch, until the latch clicked into place. He lay frozen under the sheets, too terrified to breathe. But the worst came later. The duvet began to move. First, a twitch, then a slow pull, gentle at first, then harder, until it slid off his body completely. He grabbed it, fighting back tears, but the invisible hands kept pulling. He pressed his palms flat on his chest, just to prove he was awake and still. The blanket moved beneath him. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't sleep paralysis. It was something else. Years went by, and the strange activity spread, lights flickering, the desk lid slamming shut, the TV turning on and off with no one near the remote. But the night everything changed was the night the storm came. It was late, nearly 2 a.m., and the rain hammered the windows. The boy, now 15, woke to a massive bang. It sounded like a shelf collapsing, heavy books crashing to the floor. His parents heard it too and rushed out, thinking it came from his sister's room. But everything there was untouched before they could return to bed. The loft hatch swung open with a violent crack. The same loft where he'd once played. With Isla and Owen, the sound echoed through the hallways like a scream. Minutes later, the smoke alarm downstairs began blaring, shrill, frantic, and yet, no smoke, no fire. The father turned it off, muttering about faulty wiring, but the boy knew the truth. The house was awake again. Years later, when he left for university, he thought he'd escaped it. His mother moved into his old room, claiming it was cozier. But months later, she confessed something she'd kept to herself. She couldn't sleep with the door closed. She felt watched, just like he once had. And every now and then, she swore she heard whispering to soft voices, calling from the loft. She didn't remember their names, but he did. Isla and Owen, and even now, when he dreams of that house in York, he sometimes wakes up unable to move. And somewhere in the darkness above him, the loft creaks open. If you made it this far, maybe check your own loft tonight. And if you're still brave enough, like the video and subscribe before the next story finds you.